Welcome back to another episode of Infidelity Tales Lab. We're thankful for your continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, Perfect Masks. Blake Garrison had always prided himself on reading people. 20 years in military intelligence, followed by a decade running his private security consulting firm, had taught him to spot deception from a mile away. Yet somehow he had missed the most important lie of his life, the one being told by his wife of 12 years. Ashley Garrison moved through their pristine suburban home like a ghost haunting her own life. Blake watched her from his home office doorway as she prepared dinner, her blonde hair catching the evening light. She wore the same distant expression that had become her default over the past 6 months. "How was your book club meeting?" Blake asked, stepping into the kitchen. Ashley's knife paused mid-chop against the cutting board. "Fine. We discussed that romance novel everyone's been raving about." She didn't look up. Very passionate. Blake studied her profile. Ashley had never been a good liar, but lately, her tells had become more subtle. The slight tension in her shoulders, the way she avoided eye contact, the manufactured casualness in her voice. Which one was that again? You would know it. She swept the diced onions into the pan with unnecessary force. "It's not really your type of thing." Blake's phone buzzed with a text from his business partner, Tommy Reeves. Client dinner ran late. "Rain check on drinks?" "Tommy's canceling tonight," Blake said, watching Ashley's reflection in the kitchen window. Her shoulders relaxed almost imperceptibly. "Guess I'll be home after all." This time, Ashley did turn around, and Blake caught something flickering across her face. Disappointment? Fear? It was gone too quickly to be sure. "That's nice, honey. We can watch that documentary you wanted to see." Her smile was bright and empty, like a billboard advertisement. Blake had built his career on understanding human nature. In Kandahar, that skill had kept his unit alive. In civilian life, it had made him wealthy. But standing in his own kitchen, watching his wife perform happiness, he felt like an amateur. Their marriage hadn't always been this way. Ashley used to light up when he walked into a room. She used to steal his hoodies and leave little notes in his lunch bag. She used to look at him like he was the answer to every question she'd never known to ask. Now she looked at him like he was a stranger interrupting her real life. "I'll be in the garage," Blake said, working on the Mustang. Ashley nodded without really hearing him, already lost in whatever private world she'd constructed without him. Blake's 1967 Mustang sat under a dust cover in the garage, a project he'd started 2 years ago and never finished. Tonight, like most nights, he wouldn't actually work on it. Instead, he'd think, plan, try to figure out when exactly his marriage had begun its quiet death. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through recent calls. Ashley's patterns had shifted dramatically. Late meetings that ran until 11. Weekend book clubs that lasted 8 hours. Shopping trips with friends he'd never met. Blake had run surveillance operations across 3 continents. He knew the signs of someone living a double life. The question wasn't whether Ashley was betraying him. It was how long it had been going on, and with whom. His phone rang. The caller ID showed his father-in-law's name, Robert Henley. "Blake, son, how are you holding up?" The phrasing struck Blake as odd. "Holding up with what, Bob?" A pause. "Oh, just, work stress. Ashley mentioned you've been putting in long hours." Blake hadn't worked late in weeks. His firm practically ran itself now, generating steady income from corporate security contracts and background investigations. Another lie from Ashley. "I'm doing fine, Bob. Everything okay with you and Linda?" Course. "Listen, Linda and I were thinking, why don't you and Ashley come out to the lake house this Sunday? Make a day of it. Take the boat out." Blake's grip tightened on the phone. The lake house. Ashley had been pushing for them to visit for weeks, which was strange because she usually avoided her parents' property. So it was too isolated, too boring. "That sounds great, Bob. I'll check with Ashley." Already did. She's excited about it. Said she could use some time on the water. After Bob hung up, Blake sat in the dim garage, pieces of a puzzle clicking into place in his mind. Ashley pushing for the lake house. Her father calling to confirm plans Ashley had apparently already made. The strange phrasing about holding up. Blake walked back into the house and found Ashley loading the dishwasher, humming softly to herself. She looked more relaxed than she had in months. "Your dad called," Blake said. "About Sunday." Ashley's hands stilled on a dinner plate. "Oh, good. I was hoping he'd remember to invite you." Another lie. Bob had made it clear Ashley had already discussed it with him. "Should be fun," Blake said. "When's the last time we went boating together?" "Too long." Ashley's smile seemed genuine for the first time in months. "It'll be like old times." Blake nodded and headed upstairs, leaving Ashley to her contentment. In his bedroom, he opened his laptop and began typing notes. Dates, times, conversations. The methodical documentation that had served him well in the field. Whatever was happening with his wife, whatever game was being played, Blake intended to be prepared. He'd spent his career staying 3 steps ahead of people who wanted to hurt him. He'd never imagined he'd need those skills at home. Chapter 2. Unraveling Threads. Blake's private investigation into his own life began at dawn on Tuesday. While Ashley slept, he installed a small GPS tracker under her car, the same type his firm used for corporate surveillance. If she was going somewhere she claimed not to be, he'd know. The tracker's data told a story Ashley's words never could. Tuesday afternoon, while supposedly at her yoga class, Ashley's car spent 3 hours parked outside Riverside Park's secluded picnic area. Thursday, during her book club meeting, the car sat in the parking lot of the Cedar Grove Motel for 4 hours. Blake knew the Cedar Grove. It was the kind of place people went when they didn't want to be seen. Cash only, no questions asked, rooms by the hour. On Friday, Blake called in a favor from his old Army buddy, Marcus Webb, who now worked private security in Chicago. Within hours, Marcus had pulled the Cedar Grove's guest records for the past 3 months. The same name appeared every Thursday. Derek Clayton, paid in cash, always requesting room 247. Derek Clayton. Blake ran the name through his professional databases. 34 years old, unmarried, worked as a personal trainer at Elite Fitness, the same gym where Ashley had started going 6 months ago. Blake remembered her sudden enthusiasm for working out, how she'd come home glowing and energetic after her sessions. Saturday morning, Blake drove to Elite Fitness and observed from across the street. At 10:15 a.m., Ashley's car pulled into the parking lot. At 10:17, she walked out of the gym with a tall man with dark hair and an easy smile. Derek Clayton. Blake watched them get into Derek's truck, a lifted Ford F-150 with custom rims and a sound system that probably cost more than most people's rent. They drove to a coffee shop downtown, where they sat at a corner table, Ashley's hand covering Derek's across the small surface. The conversation looked intimate. Ashley threw her head back and laughed at something Derek said, her face animated in a way Blake hadn't seen in months. When Derek reached over to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, Ashley leaned into the touch like a cat seeking warmth. Blake's hands clenched around his steering wheel. He'd seen enemy combatants, witnessed brutal interrogations, watched good men die in foreign deserts. But nothing had prepared him for the sight of his wife looking at another man the way she used to look at him. After an hour, they returned to Derek's truck. Blake followed at a distance as they drove to a residential area he didn't recognize. Derek's apartment was in a complex called Sunset Gardens. Ironic, given that it faced east and had all the charm of a storage facility. Blake parked where he could see Derek's front door and settled in a wait. His phone rang. Ashley. "Hi, honey." Her voice was bright, cheerful. "I'm going to grab lunch with some of the girls after my workout. Probably won't be home until later this afternoon." Through Derek's living room window, Blake could see 2 figures moving together in what was clearly an embrace. "Have fun," Blake said, his voice steady. "Love you." "Love you too." The words felt like ashes in his mouth. Blake hung up and continued watching. At 2:30 p.m., Ashley emerged from Derek's apartment, her hair mussed, clothes slightly wrinkled. She looked around nervously before hurrying to her car. Blake let her get a 5-minute head start before following her home. By the time he arrived, Ashley was in the shower. She sang while she washed, something she hadn't done in their house for months. That evening, over takeout Chinese food, Ashley was more talkative than she'd been in weeks. She asked about his work, laughed at his stories, even suggested they plan a vacation together. "Where would you like to go?" Blake asked, studying her face. "Somewhere tropical. Maybe the Caribbean?" Ashley twirled low mane around her chopsticks. "Somewhere we can just be together. You know." Blake nodded. "That sounds perfect." Later, as Ashley slept beside him, Blake stared at the ceiling and processed what he knew. His wife was having an affair with her personal trainer. The relationship had been going on for at least 3 months, possibly longer. She was planning something for Sunday at the lake house, something that required her father's cooperation. Blake's military training had taught him to consider all possibilities, even the ones that seemed impossible. The phrase Bob had used on the phone echoed in Blake's mind. "How are you holding up?" Like Blake was already suffering from something. Like he was a victim who just didn't know it yet. Blake turned to look at Ashley's sleeping profile. In the moonlight, she looked peaceful, almost angelic. It was hard to reconcile this image with the woman who spent Thursday afternoons in a cheap motel room. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Your wife doesn't deserve you. Meet me at Mulligan's Bar tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Come alone. A friend." Blake deleted the text and set his phone aside. Someone else knew about Ashley's affair. Someone who wanted to meet him. The web of deception was larger than he'd realized. Sunday was 2 days away. Whatever Ashley and her family had planned, Blake would be ready for it. He'd spent his career staying alive by being more prepared than his enemies. The difference was, this time, his enemies lived in his own house. Chapter 3. The Setup. Blake arrived at Mulligan's Bar 15 minutes early, choosing a corner booth with clear sight lines to all entrances. Old habits from a dangerous life in foreign countries had followed him into civilian suburbia. At exactly 8 p.m., a woman approached his table. Mid-30s, auburn hair, wearing jeans and a leather jacket. She moved with the confident stride of someone comfortable in rough environments. Blake Garrison? She didn't wait for confirmation before sliding into the booth across from him. "I'm Tracy Mullins. I work at Elite Fitness." Blake studied her face. Tracy had honest eyes and calloused hands. The kind of person who'd earned everything she had. "You sent the text." "I did." Tracy signaled the bartender for a beer. "I've been watching Derek Clayton for months. Your wife isn't his first married client, if you know what I mean." "Why tell me?" Tracy's beer arrived, and she took a long pull before answering. "Because Derek's planning something big. And because you seem like a decent guy who doesn't deserve what's coming." Blake leaned forward. "What's coming?" "Derek's been bragging to his buddies about landing a rich married woman. Says she's going to leave her husband soon, and they'll have plenty of money to start over together." Tracy's expression hardened. "But here's the thing. Derek doesn't just want your wife. He wants your money. All of it." "Ow!" Tracy pulled out her phone and showed Blake a series of text screenshots. "Derek's been messaging with your father-in-law. Planning something for this Sunday at the lake house." Blake's blood chilled as he read the messages. "Derek, everything's set for Sunday?" "Bob, Blake won't suspect anything. Ashley's playing her part perfectly." "Derek, good. Once he's gone, she inherits everything. We could be together." "Bob, just make sure it looks accidental. I don't want Linda suspecting." More messages revealed the scope of the plan. Ashley would inherit Blake's life insurance policy, $2 million, plus his business assets and property. Derek had researched Blake's swimming abilities and discovered he'd never learned. The lake house was isolated, no neighbors for miles. "They're going to kill me," Blake said quietly. "That's the plan." Tracy's voice was grim. "Throw you overboard. Claim it was an accident." "Derek knows you can't swim," Ashley told him. Blake set the phone down, his mind racing through implications. This wasn't just an affair. It was premeditated murder, with his wife as the primary conspirator. "Why help me?" Blake asked. Tracy's jaw tightened. "Derek's ex-girlfriend was a friend of mine, Carla Martinez. She accidentally drowned in a swimming pool last year. Derek was the only witness. Said she'd been drinking, slipped, and hit her head. And you think? I think Derek Clayton has done this before. I think he finds married women with money, seduces them, then eliminates the husbands. Carla's husband had a big life insurance policy too." Blake absorbed this information. Derek wasn't just his wife's lover. He was a serial killer who specialized in making murder look accidental. "Have you gone to the police?" "With what?" text messages, and suspicions. Tracy shook her head. Derek's smart. He covers his tracks. But you're different, Blake. You have military training. You can fight back. Blake nodded slowly. What do you know about Sunday's plan? Tracy showed him more messages. They're planning to take you out on the boat around noon. Bob will suggest you go swimming to cool off. When you say you can't swim, they'll playfully push you overboard. Ashley will scream for help, but by the time anyone comes to your rescue, you'll have drowned. And then, Ashley plays the grieving widow. Derek comforts her through her loss. They wait a respectable amount of time, maybe 6 months, then get married. They live happily ever after on your money. Blake finished his beer, his mind already shifting into tactical mode. I need to see Derek's apartment. Why? Because I'm going to turn their plan against them. Blake's voice was cold, controlled. They want to kill me Sunday? Fine. But they're going to discover that Blake Garrison doesn't die easily. Tracy studied his face. What are you thinking? I'm thinking Derek Clayton picked the wrong mark. I've survived Taliban ambushes, IED explosions, and assassination attempts. Some gym rat who preys on married women doesn't scare me. Blake pulled out his wallet and left money for their drinks. Can you get me into Derek's apartment? I clean the gym after hours. I have access to employee records, including addresses and keys. Tracy paused. This is dangerous, Blake. If they suspect you know, they won't. Blake stood up. I've been pretending everything's normal for days. I can do it for 2 more. As they left Mulligan's, Tracy grabbed Blake's arm. Be careful. Derek's stronger than he looks. And your wife, she's not the woman you married anymore. She's willing to watch you die for money. Blake nodded. He'd already accepted that the Ashley he'd loved was gone, replaced by someone he didn't recognize. What Tracy didn't understand was that Blake Garrison had disappeared too, replaced by someone much more dangerous. Someone who'd spent 2 decades learning how to eliminate threats. Someone who never forgot a betrayal and never left a debt unpaid. Chapter 4. Into the Deep. Sunday morning arrived with deceptive beauty. Clear skies, gentle breeze, perfect weather for a day on the lake. Blake loaded their cooler into Ashley's car, playing the role of excited husband while his mind ran through contingency plans. Ashley chattered nervously during the drive to her parents' lake house, her voice pitched higher than usual. She wore a new sundress Blake had never seen, her hair styled in loose waves that caught the sunlight through the car windows. I'm so glad we're doing this, Ashley said, her hand resting on Blake's thigh. It feels like we haven't had quality time together in forever. Blake covered her hand with his. I miss this too. The lie came easily. Blake had learned to compartmentalize emotions during his military service, to function effectively even when everything around him was falling apart. Today, that training would keep him alive. Bob Henley's lake house sat on a secluded inlet, surrounded by towering pine trees. The nearest neighbor was 5 miles away. Perfect isolation for what they had planned. Bob greeted them at the dock, his weathered face creased with what Blake now recognized as forced joviality. There's my son-in-law. Ready for some fishing? Looking forward to it, Blake replied, noting how Bob's eyes kept darting toward the tree line. Linda Henley emerged from the house, carrying a picnic basket, her movements stiff with nervous energy. I packed sandwiches and that pasta salad you like, Blake. The normalcy of the scene was surreal. 3 people planning his murder were treating him like beloved family. Blake wondered how long they'd been capable of this level of deception. Where's Derek? Ashley asked, checking her phone. Bob's expression flickered. Derek, my trainer. You said I could invite him, remember? He loves boating. Blake watched this exchange with professional interest. Ashley was improvising, creating plausible reasons for Derek's presence. She was better at this than he'd given her credit for. All right, Derek, he should be here any minute. Derek's truck rumbled up the gravel drive at exactly noon. He emerged wearing board shorts and a tank top that showcased his muscular physique. Blake had to admit the man was impressive physically, probably 6'2", lean but powerful, with the kind of build that came from years of serious training. Derek, Ashley's face lit up with genuine happiness for the first time in months. I'm so glad you could make it. Derek's greeting to Ashley was carefully platonic. A brief hug, friendly smile. To anyone watching, they were just trainer and client enjoying a social outing. Blake, right? Derek extended his hand. Ashley's told me so much about you. Blake shook the hand that would push him to his death in a few hours. Derek's grip was firm, confident. The grip of someone who'd never lost a physical confrontation. All good things, I hope, Blake replied. They loaded into Bob's fishing boat, a 24-foot Grady White with twin outboards. Blake made note of the safety equipment: life jackets in a stern compartment, emergency radio, flare gun. Standard precautions that wouldn't help him if they were part of the plan to eliminate him. Bob piloted them to the middle of the lake, where the water was nearly 100 feet deep. Dark blue and cold, even in summer. Blake estimated the water temperature at around 65 degrees, cold enough to incapacitate someone quickly, especially someone who couldn't swim. "This looks like a perfect spot," Ashley said, her voice carrying a strange undertone. They spent an hour fishing, the conversation forced and artificial. Blake caught 2 bass, while Derek caught nothing, which seemed to irritate the younger man. Blake filed away this information. Derek had a competitive streak and didn't handle losing well. "Anyone else getting hot?" Bob asked, wiping sweat from his forehead despite the cool breeze. "That sun's really beating down." Right on cue, Blake thought. "Maybe we should take a swim," Ashley suggested. "Cool off a bit." "Great idea," Derek agreed immediately. "Blake, you coming in?" Blake shook his head. "I never learned to swim properly. I'll just watch." This was their moment. Blake tensed, ready for the attack he knew was coming. "Come on," Derek said, standing up. "It's not that deep here. We'll stay close to the boat." Blake remained seated. "I'm good, thanks." Derek and Ashley exchanged a glance. Bob moved closer, ostensibly to help with the anchor. "Don't be a baby," Ashley said, her voice carrying a sharp edge Blake had never heard before. "Live a little." Derek grabbed Blake's arm. "Come on, man. It'll be fun." Blake allowed himself to be pulled to his feet, playing the reluctant participant. This was it, the moment they would push him overboard. But Blake had spent Friday night in Derek's apartment, courtesy of Tracy's key. He'd learned several interesting facts about Derek Clayton that changed everything. "All right," Blake said, moving toward the boat's edge. "But if I drown, it's your fault." Ashley laughed, a sound Blake would remember for the rest of his life. "Don't worry, honey. We'll take good care of you." Derek positioned himself behind Blake, hands on his shoulders. Bob moved to help. Ashley watched with anticipation. "On 3, Derek said. 1, 2. But Blake was no longer the man they thought they were killing. He was the soldier who'd survived ambushes in Afghanistan, the intelligence operative who'd eliminated high-value targets across 3 continents. As Derek and Bob moved to push him, Blake spun around with combat-trained speed and precision, grabbing Derek's wrist and using the younger man's momentum against him. Derek's eyes widened in shock as he found himself flying through the air toward the dark water. The splash echoed across the lake as Derek Clayton, who, Blake had discovered, couldn't swim despite his athletic prowess, hit the water and immediately began to panic. "Help!" Derek thrashed desperately, his head going under. "I can't," Ashley screamed, but not for the reason she'd planned. Bob lunged toward Blake, but Blake had already moved, his military training taking over. The fight for survival had begun, and Blake Garrison intended to be the only one who walked away from it. Chapter 5, The Reckoning. Derek's panicked thrashing in the dark water below created chaos on the boat. Ashley screamed his name, reaching toward the lake as if she could somehow pull him to safety from 15 feet away. Bob abandoned his attack on Blake and dove for the life preserver. Blake watched Derek's desperate struggle with cold calculation. The man who'd planned to watch him drown was discovering what that terror felt like firsthand. "Throw him the life ring," Ashley shouted at Blake, her composure completely shattered. Blake picked up the orange flotation device and held it calmly. "Why would I do that?" Ashley's face went pale. "What are you talking about?" "Derek's drowning. Derek's getting exactly what he planned to give me." Blake's voice carried no emotion. "The only difference is he actually can't swim." Bob had stopped reaching for the life preserver and was staring at Blake with dawning horror. I know everything, Bob. I know about the plan to push me overboard." I know about Derek and Ashley's affair. I know about the life insurance money. Blake set the life ring down, just out of Bob's reach. I even know this isn't Derek's first time killing a husband for money. Derek's head went under again, his movements becoming more erratic. Ashley was sobbing now, begging Blake to save her lover. "Please," she whispered. "I'll explain everything. Just save him." Blake looked at his wife, really looked at her, and saw a stranger. "Explain what, Ashley? How you've been planning my murder for months. How you and Derek used my father-in-law to set up the perfect killing ground." "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," Bob said, his voice shaking. "How was it supposed to happen?" Blake's tone remained conversational, as if they were discussing weekend plans instead of murder. Derek's struggles were weakening. The cold water was sapping his strength, and panic was making him waste energy. He had maybe 2 minutes before he went under for good. "Derek said you were hurting Ashley," Bob stammered. "He said you were abusive, that she was afraid to leave you." Blake almost laughed. "And you believe that? He showed me bruises." "Make up, Bob. Or maybe Derek put them there himself. You've been played by a professional killer who's done this before." Ashley had stopped begging and was now staring at Blake with naked hatred. "You bastard. You're just going to let him die. The same way you were going to let me die." Blake picked up Derek's gym bag and pulled out a waterproof pouch. Inside were Derek's phone and car keys. Except Derek made a mistake. He kept souvenirs. Blake showed them Derek's phone, open to a photo gallery that told a horrible story. Pictures of Carla Martinez, Derek's previous victim. Photos of her husband before his convenient death. Screenshots of insurance payouts and bank transfers. "Derek Clayton is a serial killer," Blake said as Derek's head disappeared beneath the surface again. "He's done this at least 3 times that I can prove. You helped a monster plan my murder, Ashley." The fight went out of Ashley all at once. She collapsed onto the boat's bench seat, staring at the water where Derek had been. "I didn't know," she whispered. "You knew enough." Blake pocketed Derek's phone. "You knew you were planning to watch your husband drown for money." Derek surfaced one more time, his face gray with exhaustion and hypothermia. His eyes met Blake's across the water, and Blake saw recognition there, the understanding that he'd been outmaneuvered by someone better at this game. Derek's mouth opened to say something, but only lake water came out. He slipped beneath the surface and didn't come back up. The lake fell silent except for Ashley's quiet sobbing. "What happens now?" Bob asked, his voice hollow. Blake started the boat's engine. "Now we go back to shore. You'll tell the police that Derek Clayton couldn't swim and jumped in anyway. Tragic accident. Ashley was too distraught to think clearly, and you were too slow with a life preserver. They'll investigate. Let them." Blake turned the boat toward shore. "Derek's phone has enough evidence to prove he was a serial killer. His apartment has trophies from previous victims. When the police dig into his background, they'll find a pattern of mysterious drownings connected to life insurance payouts." As the boat cut through the water, Blake continued. "Derek Clayton made 2 mistakes. First, he picked someone with military training. Second, he kept evidence of his previous crimes because he was proud of what he'd done." Ashley looked up at Blake with red-rimmed eyes. "What about us?" Blake met her gaze without flinching. "There's no us anymore, Ashley. You're going to divorce me quietly, take whatever settlement I offer, and disappear from my life forever. And if I don't," Blake's expression went completely cold, "then I'll make sure the police know you were Derek's accomplice in planning my murder. With Derek's phone records and the evidence in his apartment, I think a jury would be very interested to hear about your role in this conspiracy." The lake house came into view, its peaceful exterior hiding the violence that had just occurred. Linda Henley stood on the dock, waving cheerfully at their return. Blake wondered how he would explain to her that her husband had helped plan a murder, or if he would explain it all. Some truths were too large for people to carry. As they tied up at the dock, Blake realized he felt nothing. No satisfaction, no regret, no grief for his marriage or the man who died in the lake. He'd eliminated a threat and survived an attempt on his life. Everything else was just details to be managed. Derek Clayton had wanted to destroy Blake Garrison and take his life. Instead, he discovered that some men were too dangerous to hunt. The reckoning was complete. But Blake's revenge was just beginning. Chapter 6, The Aftermath. The police arrived within an hour of their return to shore. Detective Sarah Walsh, a tired-looking woman in her 40s, took statements from everyone while the dive team searched for Derek's body. Blake played his role perfectly, the grieving friend who'd watched helplessly as Derek drowned. He showed appropriate shock, answered questions with just the right mixture of confusion and distress. You didn't think to throw him the life preserver immediately? Detective Walsh asked. I'm not a strong swimmer myself, Blake replied. I guess I panicked. Bob was trying to help, but Derek went under so fast. Ashley sat wrapped in a blanket, saying almost nothing. Her shock appeared genuine, which helped sell the accidental death story. Bob stammered through his statement, his guilt making him seem authentically traumatized. This Derek Clayton, Detective Walsh said, consulting her notes. He was your wife's personal trainer, right? He seemed like a nice guy, athletic outdoorsy type. I had no idea he couldn't swim. Blake's performance was flawless. Years of intelligence work had taught him to lie convincingly under pressure. The detective found nothing suspicious in his account. Derek's body was recovered 3 hours later from the lake bottom. The preliminary examination showed no signs of trauma, just the bloated features of a drowning victim. Tragic accident, Detective Walsh told them. Happens more often than people think. Strong swimmers get overconfident, panic when they realize they're in trouble. Blake nodded sadly. Derek seemed so capable. It's hard to believe. As the police wrapped up their investigation, Blake found himself alone with Bob Henley near the dock. Linda was inside, comforting Ashley, and the other officers were packing their equipment. You killed him, Bob whispered. Blake looked out at the peaceful lake. Derek drowned because he couldn't swim and jumped into deep water anyway. That's what the official report will say. You knew he couldn't swim. The same way you knew I couldn't swim when you planned to push me overboard. Blake's voice was calm, reasonable. The difference is Derek chose to jump. I would have been murdered. Bob's hands shook as he lit a cigarette. What do you want from me? Your silence. Forever. Blake turned to face his father-in-law. You're going to live with what you almost did. Every time you look at Linda, you'll remember that you were willing to help kill your daughter's husband for money. Ashley said you were hurting her. Ashley lied to you the same way she lied to me. The same way Derek lied to both of us. Blake's expression hardened, but you still chose to believe that murder was the solution. That makes you guilty, Bob. Bob took a shaky drag from his cigarette. So what happens now? Now you live with the consequences of your choices. You don't get forgiveness. You don't get absolution. You get to carry this guilt until the day you die. Blake walked away, leaving Bob standing alone by the water where his co-conspirator had drowned. The drive home was silent. Ashley stared out the passenger window while Blake navigated the winding mountain roads. Neither of them spoke until they pulled into their driveway. I never meant for anyone to get hurt, Ashley said quietly. Blake turned off the engine and looked at her. Yes, you did. You meant for me to get hurt. You meant for me to die. Tears ran down Ashley's cheeks. I was confused. Derek made me think. Derek didn't make you do anything. You chose to have an affair. You chose to plan my murder. You chose money over the man who'd loved you for 12 years. Blake's voice carried no anger, just cold finality. Those were your decisions, Ashley. Inside their house, Blake poured himself a scotch and sat in his favorite chair. Ashley hovered in the doorway, uncertain. What happens to us? She asked. I already told you. Divorce. You take what I'm willing to give you and start over somewhere else. Blake, please. Can't we try to work through this? Blake looked at the woman who'd promised to love and honor him, who'd stood beside him at their wedding altar and vowed to forsake all others. The woman who'd spent months planning his death. Ashley, do you understand what you've done? You didn't just cheat on me. You didn't just plan to leave me. You planned to have me murdered. I thought I loved him. You love the idea of $2 million in life insurance money. Blake took a sip of scotch. Here's what's going to happen. Tomorrow morning, you're going to pack whatever fits in 2 suitcases. You're going to sign whatever divorce papers my lawyer gives you. And then you're going to disappear from my life forever. Ashley's face crumpled. You can't just throw away 12 years of marriage. You already did that when you decided I was worth more dead than alive. Blake stood up and walked to his office, leaving Ashley crying in the living room. He had work to do. Derek's phone contained evidence of multiple murders that needed to be turned over to the proper authorities, but carefully, anonymously, so that his own involvement remained hidden. As Blake began copying files from Derek's phone, he reflected on the day's events. Derek Clayton was dead. His serial killing spree ended. Ashley's betrayal was exposed. Their marriage finished. Bob Henley would live with the guilt of attempted murder for the rest of his life. Justice had been served, but Blake felt no satisfaction, just the cold emptiness that came after eliminating a threat. The same feeling he'd carried home from too many missions overseas. Blake Garrison had survived another attempt on his life. But the man who'd loved Ashley, who'd believed in their marriage, who'd trusted his family, that man had died in the lake along with Derek Clayton. What remained was something harder and more dangerous. Something that would never again make the mistake of trusting the wrong people. The reckoning was complete, but Blake's new life was just beginning. Chapter 7: Unraveling Threads. 3 weeks after Derek's death, Blake sat in his lawyer's office watching Ashley sign the divorce papers. Her hand trembled as she wrote her name, but her face remained composed. She'd learned to hide her emotions, though Blake wondered if she had any left. "The settlement is generous," Mrs. Garrison, attorney Michael Ross said. "More than you'd likely receive in court." Ashley looked up at Blake. Why? Blake had wondered the same thing. Why give her anything at all? She'd try to have him killed. By rights, she should get nothing. "Because I want you gone," Blake said simply. "The money ensures you'll leave and never come back." The settlement was $200,000, enough to start over somewhere else, not enough to live lavishly. Ashley would have to work, have to build a new life from scratch. It seemed appropriate. After Ashley left with her check and her 2 suitcases, Michael Ross poured 2 glasses of bourbon. "You know, she could have gotten much more if she'd fought the divorce," Ross said. "She couldn't fight it. Not without risking a murder conspiracy charge." Ross nodded. As Blake's lawyer for 8 years, he knew better than to ask too many questions about his client's methods. "What's next for you?" Blake considered the question. His marriage was over. His would-be killers were dead or neutralized. His business was thriving. He should have felt free, victorious even. Instead, he felt hollow. "I'm thinking about selling the security firm," Blake said. "Maybe travel for a while." "Running away?" Blake smiled grimly. "Expanding my horizons." That afternoon, Blake drove to Elite Fitness to meet Tracy Mullins. She was waiting for him in the parking lot, her expression unreadable. "I heard about the divorce," she said. "Word travels fast. Small town. People talk." Tracy studied his face. "How are you holding up?" Blake shrugged. "I'm alive. Derek isn't. Ashley's gone. The math works out in my favor." "That's not what I meant." They walked to a nearby coffee shop and found a quiet corner table. Tracy ordered a latte while Blake stuck with black coffee. "Simple, no complications." "I've been thinking about what you said," Tracy began. "About Derek being a serial killer. The police found evidence in his apartment. 3 different victims over 5 years, all married men with large life insurance policies. Derek had a very specific type." Tracy wrapped her fingers around her coffee cup. "Including you. Including me. But I wasn't as easy to kill as he expected. Because you're a dangerous man, Blake Garrison." Blake met her eyes. "Is that a problem?" "That depends. Are you planning to hurt more people?" Blake considered the question seriously. "I don't hurt innocent people, Tracy. I never have. But I don't forgive betrayal, and I don't leave threats alive to hurt me again." "What about justice? Law and order?" "The law didn't protect me from Derek. It wouldn't have stopped him from killing again. Sometimes justice has to be personal." Tracy was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was careful. "There's something else. About Derek's past." Blake leaned forward. "What?" "I did some digging after he died. Derek Clayton wasn't his real name. It was Derek Chavez. He grew up in Phoenix, got arrested twice for assault, once for attempted rape. The charges never stuck because the victims were too scared to testify. How did he end up here? Reinvented himself. New name, new backstory, fake references. The gym owner never did a proper background check." Tracy pulled out a folder. "But here's the interesting part. Derek had a partner." Blake's attention sharpened. "What kind of partner?" Someone who helped him research targets, plan the murders. I found encrypted emails on his laptop before the police confiscated it. Tracy slid a printout across the table. Someone with the initials RC. Blake scanned the emails. They detailed Derek's entire operation. How to identify wealthy married women. How to seduce them. How to plan the husband's accidental death. The partner provided background research, financial information, even helped create alibis. RC knew about me, Blake said, reading further. They knew about my military background, my security firm, my insurance policies. More than that, RC warned Derek that you might be dangerous. Suggested they be extra careful with the lake house plan. Blake felt a chill run down his spine. Derek hadn't been working alone. Someone else had been pulling the strings, someone who was still out there. The police didn't find these emails. I copied them before turning in the laptop. Figured you should see them first. Tracy's expression was grim. Blake, whoever RC is, they're still operating. And they know you killed their partner. Blake studied the emails again, his mind racing through implications. Derek's death hadn't ended the threat. It had merely eliminated one part of a larger conspiracy. Any idea who RC might be? I have some theories. But Blake. Tracy reached across the table and touched his hand. This person helped plan your murder. They're not going to just disappear because Derek's dead. Blake nodded slowly. He'd thought his revenge was complete, his enemies eliminated. But Derek Clayton had been just the tip of the iceberg. Somewhere out there, RC was planning their next move. What do you want me to do with this information? Blake asked. Tracy's smile was sharp, predatory. I wanted to find RC and make sure they can never hurt anyone else. Blake looked at the woman across from him, really looked at her. Tracy Mullins wasn't just a concerned gym employee trying to help. She was something more dangerous. Who are you really, Tracy? Someone who's been hunting Derek Clayton for a lot longer than you have. Someone who lost people to his operation. Tracy's eyes hardened. Someone who wants to see justice done, even if it has to be the kind that never sees a courtroom. Blake felt something shift inside him, a recognition of kindred spirit. Tracy Mullins was like him, someone who'd been shaped by violence, who understood that sometimes the system failed and individuals had to act. Partners? Blake asked. Tracy's smile was cold as winter. Partners. As they shook hands, Blake realized his revenge wasn't over. It was evolving, expanding into something larger and more dangerous. Derek Clayton was dead, but his network remained. And Blake Garrison intended to dismantle it piece by piece, starting with the mysterious RC. The hunt was just beginning. Chapter 8. The Network. Blake's investigation into Derek's network led him down a rabbit hole of false identities, shell companies, and carefully orchestrated murders spanning 7 states. Working with Tracy, he began to understand the scope of what they were dealing with. It's not just random killings, Tracy explained, spreading surveillance photos across Blake's dining room table. It's a business. Derek was just one operative in a larger organization. The evidence was damning. Bank records showed payments flowing from a company called Riverside Consulting to Derek and at least 3 other individuals. Life insurance payouts totaling over $15 million in the past decade, all connected to mysterious accidents involving wealthy married men. Riverside Consulting, Blake mused, studying the corporate filings. Registered in Delaware, owned by a trust, managed by Robert Chun. Tracy finished. Our mysterious RC. Blake's blood went cold. He knew that name, but not from the investigation. Robert Chun was a client of his security firm, had been for 3 years. A wealthy businessman who'd hired Blake's company to investigate potential threats to his various enterprises. Son of a bitch, Blake whispered. You know him? Blake nodded grimly. He's been paying me to investigate people for years. Business partners, competitors, anyone he considered a threat. Blake's mind raced through implications. I've been doing reconnaissance for a murder network without knowing it. Tracy's expression sharpened. What kind of information did you give him? Background checks, financial records, family information, security assessments. Blake felt sick as the realization hit him. Everything Derek would need to plan a murder. Blake pulled out his laptop and accessed his firm's client database. Robert Chin's file was extensive, dozens of investigations over 3 years, all targeting wealthy married men with substantial assets. "Look at this," Blake said, pointing to the screen. "Every man I investigated for Chun ended up dead within 6 months. Drowning accidents, hunting mishaps, car crashes. All ruled accidental." "How many?" Blake counted the files. 18. Maybe more if we go back further. The scope of the operation was staggering. Robert Chun had been using Blake's security firm to identify and research targets, then dispatching operatives like Derek to seduce the wives and eliminate the husbands. Blake had been an unwitting accomplice in mass murder. "Where is Chun now?" Tracy asked. Blake checked his files. Last known address is a penthouse in Chicago, but he travels constantly. His home's in Miami, Los Angeles, and Phoenix. Tracy stood up and walked to the window, her reflection ghost-like in the dark glass. "This is bigger than we thought, Blake. Chun isn't just running a few isolated scams. He's built an entire network of killers." Blake closed his laptop and poured himself a scotch. "The question is, what do we do about it? We could go to the FBI. With what evidence? Everything we have was obtained illegally. Chin's smart enough to insulate himself from direct involvement. Derek's dead, so he can't testify." Blake took a drink. "The legal system won't touch him." Tracy turned from the window. "Then we handle it ourselves." Blake studied her face. "You're talking about murder. I'm talking about justice. How many more husbands have to die while Chun builds his empire?" Blake considered this. Robert Chun had used him, manipulated him into helping murder innocent men. Worse, Chun might have suspected Blake was getting too close to the truth, making him a target for elimination. "Chun knows I'm a threat now," Blake said. "Derek's death, the investigation, my divorce from Ashley. He'll connect the dots eventually. All the more reason to act first." Blake's phone rang, interrupting their planning. The caller ID showed Robert Chin's number. "Speak of the devil," Blake said, showing Tracy the screen. "Answer it," she whispered. "Act normal." Blake accepted the call. "Chin, how are you?" "Blake, my friend, I heard about your recent troubles. The drowning at the lake, your divorce. I'm very sorry." Blake forced his voice to remain steady. "Thank you. It's been a difficult time. I can imagine. Listen, I have a proposition that might help take your mind off things. A new project that requires your particular skills." "What kind of project?" "There's a businessman in Seattle I need investigated. Marcus Webb. He's been making some threats against my interests, and I need to know if he's serious about following through." Blake's blood turned to ice. Marcus Webb, his old army buddy who'd helped him investigate Derek. Chin was targeting Marcus, probably because he'd helped Blake uncover the truth. "I'll need the usual background information," Blake said carefully. "Of course. I'll send over the files tonight. This one is priority, Blake. I need the report within a week." After Chin hung up, Blake stared at his phone in horror. "He's going after Marcus." "Your army friend?" "The one who helped me research Derek. Chin knows Marcus was involved in the investigation." Blake stood up, his mind racing. "I have to warn him." Tracy grabbed his arm. "Wait, think about this strategically. If you warn Marcus, Chin will know you're onto him. He'll disappear, and we'll never get another chance at him. So I just let my friend die? No, we use this as an opportunity." Tracy's eyes gleamed with predatory intelligence. "Chin's given us a way to get close to him. You deliver the report on Marcus, meet with Chun in person, and then we end this." Blake understood what she was suggesting. Use Marcus as bait to lure Chun into the open, then eliminate him before he could hurt anyone else. Marcus is a good man. He doesn't deserve to be caught up in this. Neither did any of the other 18 victims. Sometimes good people get hurt when we're fighting monsters. Blake walked to his window and looked out at the quiet suburban street. Somewhere out there, Robert Chun was planning to expand his network of killers. More husbands would die. More families would be destroyed. Also, Chun could profit from carefully orchestrated murder. The legal system couldn't touch him. The police couldn't stop him. But Blake Garrison could. "All right," Blake said finally. "We do this. But we do it my way." Tracy smiled, and Blake saw something predatory in her expression. "What's your way?" "We don't just kill Chun. We destroy his entire network. Every operative, every financial backer, every person who's profited from murder. Blake's voice was cold as winter. When we're done, there won't be enough left of his organization to hurt a fly. Tracy nodded approvingly. Now you're thinking like a soldier. Blake realized she was right. For too long, he'd been reacting to threats instead of eliminating them, playing defense instead of offense. That ended now. Robert Chun had made the mistake of targeting Blake's friends. Now he would discover that some enemies were too dangerous to make. The war was about to begin. Chapter 9. Endgame. Blake's plan was elegant in its simplicity. He would deliver Robert Chun exactly what he wanted: detailed intelligence on Marcus Webb, complete with security assessments and vulnerability analyses. But the meeting to hand over the report would be Chen's last. Tracy had spent 2 weeks infiltrating Chen's organization, using skills Blake suspected came from intelligence training she'd never mentioned. She'd identified Chen's Chicago penthouse, his security detail, his routines and habits. He's paranoid but predictable, Tracy reported. Meets new clients in his penthouse office, always at 3 p.m. on Thursdays. Security stays outside during business meetings. Blake reviewed the building schematics Tracy had obtained. What about escape routes? 2 elevators, 1 stairwell, private helipad on the roof. But Blake, Tracy's expression was troubled. Chen's not stupid. He might suspect this is a trap. Let him suspect. By the time he figures it out, it'll be too late. Blake had called Marcus and told him to disappear for a few weeks. Take a vacation, visit family, anything to get out of Seattle until this was over. Marcus had asked questions, but Blake's tone had convinced him not to argue. Thursday afternoon, Blake entered the gleaming downtown tower that housed Chen's penthouse. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor gave him time to center himself, to become the killer he'd been trained to be instead of the businessman he'd pretended to become. Chen's office was understated elegance, floor-to-ceiling windows, expensive art, furniture that cost more than most people's cars. Chen himself was a small, neat man in his 50s, wearing a tailored suit and an expression of mild curiosity. "Blake, good to see you." Chen gestured to a chair across from his desk. "You look well, considering everything you've been through." Blake sat down and placed a manila folder on the desk. "The Marcus Webb report. Everything you requested." Chen opened the folder and scanned the contents. Detailed background information, financial records, security assessments. All of it accurate, all of it professionally prepared. "Excellent work as always." Chen closed the folder. "Tell me, Blake, what's your assessment of Mr. Webb as a potential threat?" Blake kept his expression neutral. "Minimal threat capability. No military training, no security background. Runs a small private investigation firm, mostly insurance fraud cases. He'd be easy to handle if you decided to take action." Chen nodded approvingly. "And his family? Wife, children?" "Divorced, no kids. Lives alone in a condo downtown. Very isolated, socially speaking." "Perfect." Chen leaned back in his chair. "You've made this very easy, Blake." "Made what easy?" Chen's smile was cold. "Come now, Blake. Did you really think I wouldn't figure out what happened at the lake? Derek Clayton was one of my best operatives. His death wasn't the accident you made it appear to be." Blake felt the familiar calm that preceded violence. Chen knew the truth, which meant this conversation was about to become very dangerous. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Of course you do. You discovered Derek was sleeping with your wife, figured out the plan to kill you, and turn the tables. Very impressive, actually. I underestimated you." Chen opened his desk drawer and withdrew a small pistol. "The question is, what do I do with you now? You're clearly too dangerous to leave alive, but you're also too valuable to waste." Blake assessed the situation. Chen had a gun, but hadn't pointed it at him yet. The office door was 20 feet away. Chen's security detail probably just outside. Blake's own weapon, a ceramic knife that had passed through building security, was concealed in his jacket. "I have a proposition," Chen continued. "Join my organization. Use your skills for more profitable purposes than corporate security. Help me expand operations. You want me to help you murder people. I want you to help me run a business. A very lucrative business that eliminates problematic individuals while generating substantial profits." Chen's expression was earnest, as if he were offering a legitimate job opportunity. "Think about it, Blake. Your wife betrayed you. Your marriage is over, Your trust in people is shattered. Why not embrace what you really are? What am I? A killer. A very effective one, from what I can tell. Derek was no amateur, yet you eliminated him without leaving any evidence. That takes skill. Blake stood up slowly, keeping his hands visible. You're right about one thing, Chun. I am a killer. Chun raised the pistol. Sit down, Blake. But I don't kill for money. I kill threats. Blake's voice was conversational, almost friendly. And you, Robert Chun, are a threat. Blake moved faster than Chun could react, his military training taking over. The ceramic knife appeared in his hand as he dove across the desk, striking before Chun could fire. The struggle was brief and brutal. Chun was soft, unprepared for physical violence. Blake was a combat veteran who'd killed men with his bare hands in foreign countries. When it was over, Robert Chun lay dead behind his expensive desk, his blood staining the Persian rug beneath him. Blake wiped his knife clean and checked his watch. The entire encounter had taken less than 3 minutes. Chen's security team wouldn't be expecting him to leave for at least another 15 minutes. Blake picked up his report folder and walked calmly to the elevator. As the doors closed, he pressed the button for the parking garage instead of the lobby. Tracy would be waiting with a car and a clean exit route. Done, Tracy asked as Blake got into the passenger seat. Done. They drove in silence for several blocks before Tracy spoke again. What about the rest of his network? Blake pulled out Chen's phone, which he'd taken from the dead man's pocket. Chen was old-school paranoid. Kept everything on his personal device instead of trusting cloud storage or computers. The phone contained a treasure trove of information. Names, addresses, bank accounts, operational details for dozens of murders. Blake began forwarding selected files to FBI field offices across the country. Anonymous tips that would destroy Chen's network within weeks. The other operatives will be arrested or disappear once the FBI starts investigating. Either way, they're finished. Tracy smiled with satisfaction. Justice served. Blake wasn't sure if what they'd done qualified as justice, but it was certainly final. Robert Chun would never hurt another family, never order another murder, never profit from orchestrated death. 6 months later, Blake sold his security firm and bought a small ranch in Montana. The isolation suited him, and the work was honest. Raising cattle, maintaining fences, living quietly under the big sky. Tracy visited occasionally, bringing news of the outside world. Chen's network had completely collapsed under FBI investigation. Several operatives had been arrested, others had simply vanished. The surviving families of Chen's victims had received anonymous tips leading to substantial insurance settlements and criminal prosecutions. Ashley had remarried, a middle-aged accountant in Phoenix who had no idea about her past. Blake hoped she'd learned something from her experience, but he doubted it. Some people were incapable of change. Bob Henley had suffered a heart attack 3 months after Derek's death. The guilt had eaten at him until his body gave out. Blake felt no satisfaction in his father-in-law's death, just the cold recognition that actions had consequences. On quiet evenings, Blake sat on his porch and watched the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. He'd eliminated every threat to his life, avenged every betrayal, destroyed an entire network of killers. He'd won, but victory felt hollow when you had no one left to share it with. Blake Garrison had survived every enemy, overcome every obstacle, emerged triumphant from every battle. He'd also lost everything that had made life worth living. The sun set behind the mountains, and Blake went inside to his empty house, carrying the weight of perfect, terrible justice with him into the gathering darkness. Some victories came at a price too high to calculate. Some revenge cost more than the original betrayal. Blake had learned that lesson too late to matter, but he'd learned it completely. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Subscribe to Infidelity Tales Lab for more stories. Now let's begin this one. Chapter 1. The Long Road Home. Alan Hayes stood in his kitchen, watching his wife Robin methodically prep the Thanksgiving turkey with the precision she brought to everything in her life. As a pharmacist, she approached even cooking like a science experiment, measuring, timing, calculating. It was one of the things he loved about her. "You're nervous," Robin said without looking up, her dark hair falling forward as she worked. "That obvious?" Alan managed a half-smile. At 42, he'd built a successful career as a civil engineer, designed buildings that withstood earthquakes, but the thought of seeing his daughter after 3 years made his hands tremble. "You've checked your phone 17 times in the last hour." Alan set the phone down. "Emma's flight lands in 2 hours. Danielle actually said yes this time. I can't believe it's happening." Robin wiped her hands and crossed to him, touching his face. "Tell me about her. Really tell me. I've only seen pictures." So Alan told her. About Emma's laugh that sounded like bells, about how she used to help him draft blueprints with crayons at age 6, about Saturday mornings spent building elaborate Lego cities, about how his divorce from Danielle 4 years ago had turned into a custody war that left him demolished. "Danielle played the court like a violin," he said, bitterness creeping in despite himself. "Painted me as the workaholic who neglected his family. Her lawyer twisted every late night at the office into evidence of abandonment. I lost everything that mattered." "Not everything," Robin said softly. "You're getting your daughter back." But Alan remembered those custody hearings with painful clarity. Danielle's new partner, Gregorio Blair, sitting behind her in support, a smooth-talking man who'd appeared 6 months before the divorce was even final. Danielle had presented herself as the stable parent, the nurturing mother, while portraying Alan as absent and cold. The judge had bought it. For the first year, he'd gotten supervised visitation. Then Danielle moved 3 states away, Ohio to Arizona, claiming a job opportunity. The visits became holidays only. Then Emma started canceling. Phone calls grew shorter, less frequent. Danielle always had reasons. Emma was busy with school, with friends, with therapy for the trauma of the divorce. "I almost gave up," Alan admitted. "Started thinking maybe Emma was better off without me disrupting her life. Then 6 months ago, you kicked my ass." Robin smiled. "I simply suggested that perhaps the man who could engineer a 40-story building could figure out how to stay connected with his daughter." He'd started sending letters, not texts or emails that Danielle could intercept, but actual handwritten letters about his projects, his new marriage, his life. Asking questions about Emma's interests, her dreams. No pressure, no guilt trips, just presence. 2 months ago, Emma had written back. A short note, but it was hers. And last month she called, said she wanted to come for Thanksgiving. Even Danielle, surprisingly, had agreed without much fight. What if she's different? Alan voiced his deepest fear. What if 3 years is too long? What if she doesn't? "Alan," Robin's voice was firm. "You're her father. That bond doesn't break. It bends, it stretches, but it doesn't break." Chapter 2. Something's wrong. Emma walked through the airport terminal like a ghost, and Alan's heart seized. She was 14 now, taller than he remembered, her blonde hair longer. But something was off. "Dad." Her voice was flat as she hugged him, her movements mechanical. "Emma, sweetheart, I've missed you so much." He pulled back to look at her. Her eyes seemed distant, pupils slightly dilated despite the bright terminal lights. "How was the flight?" "Fine, I guess. I don't really remember." She blinked slowly, as if struggling to focus. Robin extended her hand with a warm smile. "Emma, I'm so happy to finally meet you. Your dad talks about you constantly." "Hi," Emma said, shaking hands with a weak grip. Her hand trembled slightly. In the car, Alan kept glancing at his daughter in the rearview mirror. She stared out the window, barely responding to his questions about school, her friends, her interests. The vibrant girl, he remembered, seemed buried under layers of fog. Just tired from the flight, he told himself, but the words fell hollow. Thanksgiving dinner should have been perfect. Robin had outdone herself. Turkey, stuffing, 3 kinds of pie. But Emma picked at her food, her fork occasionally slipping from her fingers. "Sorry," she mumbled, retrieving it for the 3rd time. I'm so clumsy lately. No worries, honey, Alan said, trying to keep his voice light. Growing pains, right? You've gotten so tall. Emma's response was delayed, like she was processing through water. Yeah, I guess. Robin had been watching Emma carefully throughout the meal, her pharmacist's eye cataloging details. The slight tremor in Emma's hands, the way she seemed to zone out mid-conversation, staring at nothing. The sluggish responses, the dilated pupils, the dry mouth. Emma had drunk 4 glasses of water during dinner. After they'd finished eating, Emma excused herself to the bathroom. Robin immediately grabbed Alan's wrist, pulling him into the kitchen, her face pale. We need to go to the police right now, she whispered urgently. What? What? Didn't you see? That child's been drugged. Systematically, long-term. Alan, those aren't teenage changes or jet lag. Those are symptoms of chronic benzodiazepine use, probably mixed with some kind of antipsychotic. The tremors, the cognitive fog, the dilated pupils, the motor control issues. I see this in patients who've been over-medicated. Alan's blood turned to ice. That's impossible. Danielle wouldn't. Look at her, Alan. Really look. Robin's voice was shaking. Someone has been chemically sedating your daughter. For months, maybe longer. Alan stared at Robin, then back toward the hallway where Emma had gone. His engineer's mind, trained to see structural problems others missed, suddenly saw the cracks. Emma's delayed responses, her vague memory of the flight, the way she'd seemed surprised by her own clumsiness, like it was new. The flatness in her voice, not teenage angst, but pharmaceutical suppression. Oh God, he breathed. What do? We need to examine her medications. Kids her age don't just develop these symptoms. Someone is giving her something. When Emma returned, Alan kept his voice casual. Hey, sweetie, did you bring your vitamins? Your mom mentioned you need to take some supplements. Oh yeah. Emma's response was automatic, robotic. In my bag. I need to take them before bed. Gregorio says it's important. Gregorio? Alan's jaw tightened. He manages your medications? He helps Mom. He knows about this stuff. He used to work with medicines or something. Robin and Alan exchanged loaded glances. After Emma went to her room, Robin retrieved the bag and found 3 prescription bottles labeled as vitamin supplements from a doctor Alan had never heard of. Robin's hands shook as she examined them. This is alprazolam, a powerful anti-anxiety medication. This is quetiapine, an antipsychotic used for bipolar disorder and schizophrenia. And this, she checked the 3rd bottle, is clonazepam, another benzodiazepine. Alan, these doses would sedate an adult. She's been taking these daily. The labels say twice daily. Alan read, his voice hollow. For the past 18 months. She's 14 years old. She shouldn't be on any of these unless she has a severe mental health condition. Does she? No. Emma was always happy, energetic, completely normal. Danielle never mentioned anything. Robin's face was grim. Because there's nothing wrong with Emma. Someone is keeping her medicated for a reason. And I guarantee this doctor, if he even exists, has never actually examined her. These prescriptions are fake or fraudulent. Alan felt something cold and hard crystallize in his chest. Someone had been poisoning his daughter, keeping her docile, compliant, barely aware. And he had a good idea who. Gregorio Blair, he said slowly. Danielle's partner. You said he told Emma he used to work with medicines. I'll find out exactly who he is, Robin said, already opening her laptop. But Alan, we need to be smart about this. If we call the police right now, Danielle will lawyer up. She'll claim the medications are legitimate from a real doctor. It'll turn into a he said, she said while Emma gets sent back to them. Alan looked toward Emma's room, where his daughter was probably preparing to take another dose of the drugs that had stolen 3 years of her childhood. No, he said quietly. Emma's not going anywhere, and whoever did this to her is going to pay. But you're right. We need to be smart. He thought of the blueprints he'd drawn for earthquake-resistant buildings. The careful calculations, the redundant safety systems, the way you had to anticipate every possible point of failure. We're going to build a case they can't escape from, Alan said, and then we're going to destroy them. Chapter 3. The trap is baited. Emma slept until noon the next day, her body finally surrendering to exhaustion that had nothing to do with travel. When she woke, Alan was waiting with breakfast and a gentle smile. "Hey, sweetheart, how do you feel?" "Tired." "Foggy." Emma rubbed her eyes. "Is that weird? I feel like I'm always tired lately." "Tell me about your routine at home," Alan said carefully. "What's a normal day like?" As Emma described her life in Arizona, the picture grew darker. "Wake up late, groggy. Take morning medications that Gregorio had ready at breakfast. School." But she couldn't remember much about classes, just moving through them in a haze. Home by 3. Afternoon medications. Homework that took hours because she couldn't focus. Evening medications. Bed by 9, but never feeling truly rested. "Gregorio says I have anxiety and focus issues," Emma said, her voice uncertain. "That I need the medications to be normal. But Dad, I don't remember being anxious before. Was I? When I was younger?" Alan's heart broke. "No, baby. You were the happiest kid I ever knew. Always laughing, always building things with me, always curious about everything." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "I can't remember that. I can barely remember being happy. What's wrong with me?" "Nothing is wrong with you," Robin said, entering with a tray. "But we need to talk about your medications." They spent the next hour carefully explaining, showing Emma the bottles, describing what the drugs actually were. Emma's confusion turned to horror. "But," Gregorio said, "these were vitamins. For my development. Mom said I needed them. When did you start taking them?" Alan asked, Emma's brow furrowed with effort. After you and Mom got divorced. After Gregorio moved in. He said the divorce had traumatized me, that I needed help processing it. But I don't remember being traumatized. I was sad, but I wasn't." She looked up with terrified eyes. "What do they do to me?" "We're going to figure this out," Alan promised. "But first, we need to get these medications out of your system safely. Robin knows how to do this properly. You're going to stay here with us while we help you get better. Mom will never allow that. She'll come get me." "Let me worry about your mother," Alan said, his voice hard. He called Danielle that afternoon. "Emma's come down with something, fever, nausea. I don't think she should fly. I'll keep her here until she's better, then send her home." Danielle's voice was sharp. "Put her on. I want to talk to her." Alan handed the phone to Emma, who'd been coached. "Hi, Mom. Yeah, I feel really sick. Dad and Robin are taking good care of me. I'll call you tomorrow." Emma's performance was perfect, groggy, weak, convincing. After hanging up, Alan turned to Robin. "That buys us maybe 3 days. What did you find on Gregorio?" Robin's research had been thorough. Gregorio Blair, age 45, had worked as a pharmaceutical sales representative for 10 years before being fired 3 years ago. Multiple complaints about unethical practices, pushing doctors to prescribe medications inappropriately, falsifying patient need reports. His license to work in pharmaceutical sales had been revoked. "He knows exactly how to get prescriptions without legitimate medical need," Robin said. "Probably still has contacts, doctors who will write scripts for cash." "And look at this." She pulled up another document. Right after he lost his job, he moved in with Danielle, who had just won full custody of a daughter with a trust fund. "Emma's trust," Alan breathed. "From my father." His father had set up a trust for Emma when she was born, $2.5 million, accessible when she turned 16 with parental approval or at 18 without. Alan had forgotten about it in the chaos of the divorce, but the documents were ironclad. Emma controlled it, with her legal guardian able to advise but not control the funds. "They've been drugging her to keep her compliant," Robin said. "So when she turns 16 in 2 years, they can manipulate her into signing it over." A drugged, confused teenager will do whatever her mother and stepfather tell her to do. Alan felt rage, cold, calculated rage, building in his chest. They'd stolen 3 years of his daughter's childhood. 3 years of her memories, her personality, her life. All for money. "We need evidence," he said. "Enough that they can't spin their way out of it." Over the next 2 days, Alan and Robin worked systematically. Robin consulted with a trusted colleague, Dr. Marcus Mathis, who agreed to conduct private medical tests on Emma. Blood work confirmed what Robin suspected. Emma had dangerous levels of benzodiazepines and antipsychotics in her system, far beyond any therapeutic dose. This is chemical abuse, Dr. Mathis said grimly. She could have had seizures, organ damage, developmental delays. Whoever prescribed this should lose their medical license. They obtained the prescribing doctor's information from the bottle, Dr. Eugene Ruiz. Robin's contacts revealed he'd been flagged multiple times for inappropriate prescribing, barely avoiding license suspension. Emma, meanwhile, was slowly emerging from the fog. Robin carefully reduced the medications under Dr. Mathis's supervision, managing withdrawal symptoms. Each day, Emma became more alert, more like herself, and more angry. I missed 3 years, she told Alan one night, tears streaming. 3 years where I don't remember anything clearly. School, friends, my own life, it's all just this fuzzy blur. They took that from me, Dad. What? Money, Alan said honestly. They wanted to control you to get to your trust fund. I hate them, Emma whispered. I hate what they did. I know, baby. Me too. On day 3, Danielle called, demanding Emma come home immediately. Her voice had an edge of panic. She's well enough to fly now. I've booked her a ticket for tomorrow. No, Alan said simply. Excuse me? Emma's staying with me. Permanently. I'm filing for emergency custody. There was a long pause. You can't do that. I have legal custody. We'll see what the court says when they hear about the medication abuse. Another pause, longer this time. I don't know what Emma's told you, but she has legitimate medical conditions. Her doctors prescribed necessary treatment. Dr. Eugene Ruiz? The one flagged for prescription fraud? Prescriptions filled without ever examining Emma? The drugs keeping my 14-year-old daughter sedated 24/7. You're making wild accusations. You have no proof of anything. Actually, Danielle, I have quite a bit of proof. Medical tests, blood work, expert testimony. And I'm going to bury you with it. He hung up, his hand steady. Robin looked at him with concern. She's going to come here. With Gregorio. They're going to try something. I'm counting on it, Alan said, a cold smile crossing his face. Because I'm not just stopping them. I'm destroying them. Completely. He pulled out a notebook filled with engineering calculations and diagrams. But these weren't for buildings. They were for something much more personal. They used pharmaceuticals to trap Emma, he said. So let's see how they like being caught in their own trap. Only this time, they won't see it coming until it's too late. Robin looked at the plans, her expression shifting from concern to grim satisfaction. When do we start? Tomorrow, Alan said. We're going to give them exactly what they want, a chance to explain themselves. And they're going to walk right into a trap they'll never escape from. Chapter 4, Unraveling. Emma sat curled on the couch, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders despite the warm Arizona sun streaming through the windows. It was day 6 of her withdrawal, and the tremors had gotten worse before getting better. But her mind was finally clear. I remember now, she said suddenly, making Alan and Robin look up from their coffee. Dad, I remember the first time Gregorio gave me those pills. Alan moved to sit beside her. Tell me everything, sweetheart. It was about a week after Gregorio moved in. Mom said I'd been having nightmares about the divorce, but I wasn't. I was sleeping fine. But suddenly, she was insisting I needed to see this doctor. Only. Emma's brow furrowed. I don't think we ever actually went to a real doctor's office. Gregorio took me to this weird building downtown. There's a nameplate on the door, but the office was mostly empty. Just a desk and a chair. This man came in, asked me a few questions about school, and then Gregorio told him what to write. I remember thinking it was weird, but Gregorio said it was just how behavioral medicine worked. Can you remember what building? Robin asked. I think so. It was near this weird mural of a cactus. Robin was already pulling up maps on her laptop. Within minutes, they'd located the building. More research revealed it was owned by a medical supply company, and one of the offices was rented to Dr. Eugene Ruiz on a part-time basis. He's running a pill mill, Robin said grimly. Sees patients for cash, writes prescriptions without proper diagnosis. Gregorio probably pays him directly. Alan added this to his growing file. Bank records, which he'd obtained through less-than-legal means using his connections from construction projects, showed regular cash withdrawals from Danielle's account, corresponding with Emma's prescription refill dates. Dad, Emma said quietly. There's something else. Gregorio films everything. Films what? My sessions with him. He calls them therapy talks. He sits me down and asks me questions about what I remember, what I'm feeling. He recorded it all on his phone. Says it's for my doctors to review. But Dad, her voice dropped to a whisper. When I was foggy from the medications, he would ask me about money, about Grandpa's trust, about what I'd do with it when I turned 16. And I'd answer whatever he wanted because I couldn't think straight. I remember him smiling when I said I'd probably just let Mom and him handle it because finances are too complicated. Alan felt his rage crystallize into something cold and sharp. Emma, this is important. Does Gregorio still have these recordings? He keeps them on his laptop, in a folder called Emma Progress Notes. Mom doesn't even know about them, I don't think. It's Gregorio's special project. Good girl, Alan said, hugging her. You've been so brave. That night, after Emma had gone to bed, Alan made a call to Coy Little, an old friend from his army days who now worked in private security. I need you to help me acquire something, Alan said. And I need it done quietly. How quietly we talking? Invisible. No trace. What's the target? A laptop. I'll send you the details. 3 days later, Coy called back. Your package is ready for pickup. Real interesting footage on there, by the way. Guy's a piece of work. Alan and Robin spent hours watching the recordings. Gregorio's face filled the screen, his voice smooth and manipulative as he questioned a drugged Emma about the trust fund, about her relationship with Alan, about her future plans. In every video, Emma was clearly impaired, slurred speech, vacant eyes, barely coherent. And in every video, Gregorio carefully guided her to say exactly what he wanted. This is evidence of coercion, Robin said, of financial exploitation of a minor. Combined with the medical abuse, they're looking at serious criminal charges. But that's not enough, Alan said. Criminal charges take time. Lawyers, trials, appeals. They could drag this out for years, and Emma would be caught in the middle. No, I want them destroyed. Completely. I want everyone to know what they are. He began crafting his plan with the precision he brought to structural engineering. Every load-bearing point identified. Every weakness calculated. Every potential failure mode anticipated. First, we separate them, he explained to Robin. Danielle and Gregorio only work as a team. Apart, they'll turn on each other. Second, we make them feel safe. People are most vulnerable when they think they've won. Third, we bring in witnesses they can't refute. People who matter to Danielle, whose opinions she can't dismiss. Her mother, Robin said. Emma's grandmother. Exactly. Diane Carpenter still lives in Ohio. She's old school, religious, family-oriented. And she's been kept away from Emma for 3 years, just like me. Danielle told her Emma was too busy with activities to visit. Alan reached out to Diane through a carefully worded letter, explaining that Emma had been staying with him and missed her grandmother terribly. Would she consider coming to Arizona for a family gathering? Danielle need not know. They'd surprise her. Diane's response came quickly. She'd been trying to see Emma for years, but Danielle always had excuses. She'd love to come. Now we need someone Danielle can't intimidate in a legal setting, Alan continued. Someone with authority. A mediator, Robin suggested. Someone who seems neutral, but will be witness to whatever happens. Alan contacted Randall McCoy, a retired family court judge now working as a private mediator. He explained the situation, carefully, with evidence. I've seen cases like this, Randall said grimly. Parents drugging kids to keep them compliant. It's evil. I'll help you, but we do this by the book. That's exactly what I want, Alan assured him. The pieces were falling into place. Alan had evidence, witnesses, and a plan. Now he just needed to get Danielle and Gregorio exactly where he wanted them. Chapter 5. The Pressure Builds. Danielle and Gregorio showed up at Alan's door on a Saturday morning, exactly 10 days after Emma's arrival. Alan had been expecting them, had, in fact, been counting on it. We're taking Emma home, Danielle said without preamble. She looked tired, her makeup unable to hide the stress lines around her eyes. Today, come in, Alan said calmly, stepping aside. Let's talk about this like adults. Gregorio followed Danielle inside, his eyes scanning the room like a predator assessing territory. He was tall, fit, with perfectly styled dark hair and expensive clothes that seemed at odds with an unemployed pharmaceutical rep. Alan had done more digging. Gregorio had been living off Danielle's income and credit card for 3 years. "There's nothing to talk about," Gregorio said, his voice smooth but with an undertone of menace. "Emma is a minor. Danielle has legal custody. You're keeping her here illegally. Actually, I filed for emergency custody modification 3 days ago," Alan said, pulling out paperwork, citing medical abuse and endangerment. "The hearing is in 2 weeks." Danielle's face went white. "Medical abuse? Emma has legitimate conditions that require—" "Stop." Alan's voice cut like steel. "We both know Emma has never been diagnosed with anything except what you and your boyfriend manufactured. We know about the fake appointments, the pill mill doctor, the medications. All of it. You can't prove anything," Gregorio said, but his confidence had cracked slightly. "Can I?" Alan opened a folder. "Here's Emma's medical history from her pediatrician before the divorce. Perfectly healthy, no mental health issues. Here's blood work from last week showing dangerous levels of benzodiazepines and antipsychotics. Here's Dr. Eugene Ruiz's disciplinary record. Should I continue?" Danielle looked at Gregorio with sudden suspicion. Eugene said those prescriptions were legitimate. "You said he was a real doctor." "He is a real doctor," Gregorio said quickly. "Emma needed treatment for anxiety after the divorce. You saw how upset she was." "I saw a normal kid dealing with her parents' separation," Alan interrupted. "What I'm seeing now is a teenager who's been chemically sedated for 3 years. And I'm seeing you two trying to maintain access to her trust fund." "This is ridiculous," Danielle said, but her voice wavered. "I would never hurt Emma for money. She's my daughter." "Then why is Gregorio the one managing her medications?" Robin asked, speaking for the first time. "Why have you been pulling cash from your account every month to pay for prescriptions under the table? Why haven't you visited a legitimate psychiatrist in 3 years? You've been going through my bank records?" Danielle's face flushed with anger. "That's illegal." "No, what's illegal is drugging a child," Robin said coolly. "What's illegal is obtaining prescriptions under fraudulent pretenses. What's illegal is financial exploitation of a minor." "Do you want me to continue?" Gregorio's jaw tightened. "We should go. Get a lawyer. This is harassment." "By all means, get a lawyer," Alan said. "Because that hearing in 2 weeks? I'm bringing all of this evidence. I'm bringing Emma, who's been off those drugs for 10 days and is finally thinking clearly again. I'm bringing medical experts. You're not just losing custody, Danielle. You're both going to be facing criminal charges." They left shortly after, but not before Gregorio threw Alan a look that promised violence. Alan watched them get into their car, saw them arguing before they even left the driveway. "That went better than expected," Robin said. "They're rattled, but they're not beaten yet. They'll come back with something." Alan was right. 2 days later, he came home to find his truck keyed, all 4 tires slashed. No witnesses, no cameras caught anything. But Alan knew. "He's trying to intimidate me," he told Coy Little over the phone. "Make me back down. You want protection?" "No. I wanted to think it worked. Let him feel confident." The next day, Alan sent Danielle a message. "I'm willing to discuss a compromise for Emma's sake." Family mediation? Neutral territory? Danielle's response came quickly, finally seeing sense. "When and where?" Alan smiled. Hook set. He arranged the mediation for the following Saturday at Randall McCoy's office. Told Danielle it would be just the 4 of them, Danielle, Gregorio, Alan, and Robin, with Randall as neutral mediator. What he didn't tell her was who else would be there. Emma spent the week getting stronger, both physically and mentally. The withdrawal symptoms had mostly passed, leaving behind a sharp, angry teenager who wanted justice. "I want to be there," she told Alan. "I want to face them." "You will," Alan promised. "But we're going to do this my way. Trust me. Always, Dad." Diane Carpenter arrived Thursday night, and a reunion with Emma brought both women to tears. Emma's grandmother held her for a long time, then looked at Alan with fierce gratitude. "Thank you for saving her." "Thank Robin," Alan said. She's the one who recognized what was happening. Thank you both, then. Now, tell me how I can help destroy the people who did this to my granddaughter. Alan smiled. He liked Diane. Friday night, Alan held a final planning session. Everyone was there. Robin, Emma, Diane, Randall, Coy for security, and Dr. Marcus Mathis, who'd agreed to attend as an expert witness. Here's how tomorrow goes, Alan explained, spreading documents across the table. Danielle and Gregorio think they're coming to a simple mediation. They think they'll negotiate visitation, maybe some oversight on Emma's care, and maintain primary custody. They're wrong. He outlined his plan. The others listened, occasionally asking questions, making suggestions. By the end, everyone knew their role. They've been playing games with my daughter's life for 3 years, Alan said quietly. Tomorrow, the game ends, and they lose everything. Chapter 6. Setting the Trap. Randall McCoy's office was designed for comfort. Soft lighting, pleasant artwork, a large conference table surrounded by cushioned chairs. It was meant to make people feel at ease during difficult conversations. Alan planned to exploit that. Danielle and Gregorio arrived at 10 a.m. sharp, both dressed professionally. Danielle wore a cream-colored suit that screamed respectable mother. Gregorio had gone for business casual, expensive jeans, tailored blazer. They prepared for battle. Alan, Robin, Danielle said with forced pleasantness. I'm glad we could do this civilly. For Emma's sake. For Emma's sake, Alan echoed. Please sit down. Randall will be with us shortly. They settled around the conference table. Alan poured coffee, made small talk about the weather, played the part of reasonable ex-husband willing to compromise. He watched Gregorio relax slightly, saw Danielle's shoulders drop from their defensive position. Good. They felt safe. Randall entered, an older gentleman with gray hair and a grandfatherly demeanor. Good morning, everyone. I'm Randall McCoy, and I'll be facilitating today's discussion. Let's start by establishing what we're here to accomplish. We want to ensure Emma receives proper care, Danielle said quickly. Alan has been making wild accusations about her medical treatment. We're willing to be transparent about everything, show that her care has been appropriate, and work out a visitation schedule that works for everyone. That sounds reasonable, Randall said. Alan, your perspective? I want what's best for my daughter, Alan said simply. I want her safe, healthy, and happy. And I want to understand exactly what's been happening for the past 3 years. Very good. Now, before we begin, I should mention that in mediation sessions like this, I often invite other relevant family members to participate, with both parties' consent, of course. It helps provide fuller context. Danielle frowned. What other family members? The conference room door opened. Diane Carpenter walked in. Mom. Danielle's voice cracked. What are you doing here? I'm here for my granddaughter, Diane said, her voice cold. The granddaughter I haven't been allowed to see for 3 years because you always had some excuse. This is ambush tactics, Gregorio said, standing. Unprofessional. We're leaving. Sit down, Mr. Blair, Randall said, his grandfatherly tone gone. Or would you prefer we hold this conversation in a courtroom instead? I'm still a member of the bar, and I can file an emergency motion faster than you can reach your car. Gregorio slowly sat back down. The door opened again. Emma walked in, flanked by Dr. Mathis. Emma. Danielle stood, reaching for her daughter. Baby, are you okay? We've been so worried. Don't touch me. Emma's voice was sharp, clear, nothing like the foggy teenager from 2 weeks ago. Don't you dare act like you care. Emma. I'm your mother, You drugged me. Emma's voice rose. For 3 years. You and him. She pointed at Gregorio. You turned me into a zombie, so you could control me. That's not true, Danielle said, but her voice shook. You were sick. You needed help. Tell her, Gregorio. Perhaps Mr. Blair should wait before speaking, Randall interrupted. Because I'd very much like to see some of his previous recordings first. Alan connected his laptop to the conference room screen. What recordings? Danielle asked. Alan pressed play. Gregorio's voice filled the room. Emma, let's talk about your trust fund again. When you turn 16, you'll have access to $2.5 million. That's a lot of money for a young girl to manage. You'd probably want help with that, right? On screen, A drugged, barely coherent Emma nodded slowly. Too much can't. So you want your mother and me to help you invest it? Make decisions about it. Uh-huh. You know better. I don't. That's right. We'll take good care of it for you. You don't need to worry about anything. Danielle's face had gone ashen. Gregorio, what is this? It's called financial exploitation, Alan said. He's been documenting Emma's consent to hand over her trust fund. Except it's not real consent. It's coerced from a drug minor. Alan played another clip, and another, each one showing Gregorio carefully manipulating Emma, guiding her to say exactly what he wanted while she was impaired. I didn't know, Danielle whispered, staring at Gregorio. You said you were doing therapy sessions with her. You said you were helping. He was helping himself, Robin said, to Emma's inheritance, using you and your custody as the vehicle. Dr. Mathis spoke up, his voice professional and damning. I've reviewed Emma's medical records, conducted current examinations, and analyzed her blood work from 10 days ago. This young lady was being systematically over-medicated with powerful psychiatric drugs she had no medical need for. The doses were high enough to keep her in a constant state of cognitive impairment. The prescribing physician, Dr. Eugene Ruiz, has a history of fraudulent prescriptions. This is medical abuse, plain and simple. No, Danielle said, but she was looking at Gregorio with horror. No, you said she needed treatment. You said Dr. Ruiz was reputable. He said what you wanted to hear, Diane cut in, her voice sharp. Because you chose to believe this man over your own daughter's well-being. How could you, Danielle? How could you do this to Emma? I didn't. I believed. Danielle was crying now, mascara running. Gregorio, tell them this was legitimate treatment. But Gregorio had gone very still, his face calculating. I'm not saying anything without a lawyer. Smart man, Alan said, because I've already turned this evidence over to the district attorney. They're reviewing it for criminal charges, medical abuse of a minor, financial exploitation, obtaining prescriptions under false pretenses, child endangerment. Both of you are looking at serious prison time. Both of us. Danielle, turn on Gregorio. This was your idea. You were the one who said Emma needed medications. You were the one who handled everything. Don't say another word. Gregorio snapped at her. They're trying to turn us against each other. Turn you against each other? Alan laughed, but there was no humor in it. You did that yourselves. Let me show you something else. He pulled out bank statements. These are Danielle's accounts. Regular cash withdrawals for Emma's fake prescriptions. But look at these charges. Luxury hotels in Vegas, expensive restaurants, designer clothes. All on Danielle's cards, all signed by Gregorio. You've been bleeding her dry while planning to steal Emma's trust fund. Gregorio's confident facade cracked. He looked at Danielle, clearly calculating whether to continue denying or to start protecting himself. Alan pulled out another document. And Danielle, you should know, Gregorio has been talking to a lawyer. Not about defending you both. About how to pin all of this on you if it ever came out. How to claim he was just following your instructions as Emma's mother. How to walk away clean while you take the fall. That's a lot, Gregorio shouted. Is it? Alan pushed the document across the table. Email correspondence between Gregorio and a criminal defense attorney discussing exactly that scenario. I have friends in interesting places, Gregorio. You should have been more careful about your digital footprint. Danielle stared at the emails, then at Gregorio, her face transforming from shock to fury. You son of a bitch. You were going to let me go to prison? For your scheme. It wasn't my scheme. You knew about the medications. You approved everything. Because you told me she needed them. You said Dr. Ruiz was legitimate. You handled everything. Stop. Randall's voice cut through the shouting. Both of you are incriminating yourselves. I strongly suggest you both retain counsel immediately. This mediation is over. But Mr. Hayes, I believe you have a custody petition pending. I do, Alan said calmly. Based on what I've witnessed here today, I'll be providing a recommendation to the court that full custody be granted to you immediately, with supervised visitation only for Ms. Moody pending criminal proceedings. Additionally, I'll be filing a mandatory report of child abuse with Child Protective Services. Danielle let out a sound like a wounded animal. Emma, sitting beside her grandmother, showed no emotion at all. "You're enjoying this," Gregorio said to Alan, venom in his voice. "Destroying us." "No," Alan said quietly. "I'm protecting my daughter. You destroyed yourselves the moment you decided she was worth less than money." Security, Coy Little and a colleague, appeared at the door. "We're here to ensure everyone leaves safely," Coy said, his presence making it clear that safely was not optional. As Danielle and Gregorio were escorted out, separately, still arguing, Diane put her arm around Emma. "Is it over?" Emma asked. "Almost," Alan said, "but not quite. They're going to try to fight this. Hire lawyers, make accusations. We need to be ready for one more round." But as he watched Danielle and Gregorio leave the building, still shouting at each other, blaming each other, Alan knew the hardest part was done. He'd broken their partnership, and divided they would fall. Chapter 7. Fractures. The week following the mediation, Alan's prediction proved correct. Danielle and Gregorio each hired lawyers, different lawyers, and began the desperate dance of self-preservation. Alan tracked every move through his network. Coy's contacts in the legal community reported that Gregorio's attorney was building a defense centered on Danielle as the primary villain. She had custody, she made medical decisions. Gregorio was merely her supportive partner following her instructions. Danielle's lawyer, meanwhile, was preparing to paint Gregorio as a manipulative con artist who'd taken advantage of a stressed single mother, convincing her that Emma needed treatment while he secretly planned to steal the trust fund. Both versions had elements of truth, which made both versions vulnerable. Alan sat in his home office Wednesday evening, building the final pieces of his case like engineering a complex structure. Every document categorized, every timeline verified, every witness statement cross-referenced. Robin brought him coffee and looked over his shoulder at the organized chaos. "You're like a man possessed." "I need this airtight," Alan said. "No gaps they can exploit, no witnesses they can discredit. Emma's future depends on it." Emma herself was thriving. Each day brought more clarity, more of her original personality back. She'd started drawing again, something she'd abandoned during the medicated years, and her sketches showed real talent. She and Robin had bonded over late-night baking sessions, and her relationship with Diane had rekindled warmly. But the healing wasn't complete. Emma had nightmares about being drugged, about waking up and not knowing where she was. She had rage at 3 stolen years, and she had questions Alan couldn't answer about why her mother had chosen money over her. Thursday morning brought the first crack in Danielle and Gregorio's defenses. Dr. Eugene Ruiz, facing his own medical board investigation, made a deal. He'd testify about Gregorio approaching him with cash to write prescriptions for Emma without proper examinations. He'd admit that Gregorio had specified the medications and doses, claiming they were for behavioral management rather than medical treatment. Ruiz is small fish trying to avoid becoming bait, Coy reported. But his testimony destroys Gregorio's claim that he was just following Danielle's medical decisions. Friday brought the second crack. Danielle's financial advisor came forward, not voluntarily, but under subpoena, with records showing Gregorio had been pressuring Danielle to take larger cash advances against her credit, claiming they needed liquidity for Emma's trust fund management when Emma turned 16. The advisor had flagged it as suspicious, but Danielle had overridden his concerns. "Shows premeditation," Alan noted. Gregorio was already setting up mechanisms to access the money 2 years before Emma would legally have access. But the biggest crack came Saturday, and it came from an unexpected source. Gregorio, feeling the walls closing in, made a catastrophic mistake. He contacted Emma directly. Emma's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Emma, it's Gregorio. I need you to know none of this was meant to hurt you. Your mother and I only wanted what was best. If you tell the lawyers that you remember feeling anxious after the divorce, that you asked for help, this can all go away. I'll make sure you get her trust fund without any problems. Just tell them you wanted the medication." Emma showed the text to Alan immediately. "He's trying to tamper with a witness," Robin said, reading over Alan's shoulder. "A minor witness in a child abuse case." Alan smiled, not a pleasant smile. He just handed us everything we need. He forwarded the message to the district attorney, to Emma's guardian ad litem, appointed by the court, and to Danielle's attorney. The response was swift and brutal. Gregorio's lawyer withdrew from the case Sunday morning. By Monday, the DA had added witness tampering to the list of charges against Gregorio. His bail was revoked, and he was arrested pending trial. Danielle, seeing her former partner's complete collapse, made her choice. Her attorney reached out to Alan's lawyer Tuesday morning with a proposal. Danielle would provide full testimony against Gregorio, admit her role in negligently allowing the medication abuse, and surrender all custody rights to Alan permanently. In exchange, she would plead to lesser charges with probation instead of prison time. She's trying to save herself, Alan told Emma when they got the news. What do you think? Emma was quiet for a long moment. Will I have to see her? If she doesn't go to prison? Not if you don't want to. The custody surrender would be complete. She'd have no rights, no visitation unless you specifically requested it when you're older. Then okay, Emma said softly. I don't want her in prison. Despite everything, she's still my mom. But I don't want her in my life right now. Alan relayed the acceptance through his attorney, with one addition. Danielle had to provide every piece of evidence against Gregorio, testify fully and truthfully, and publicly acknowledge the harm done to Emma. Danielle agreed. Wednesday brought the custody hearing. It was anticlimactic, almost boring in its efficiency. Danielle's attorney presented the negotiated surrender. Alan's attorney presented the evidence, now overwhelming with Danielle's cooperation. The judge reviewed, asked Emma privately if she wanted to live with her father. She did, and signed the order. Full custody to Alan Hayes. No visitation rights for Danielle Moody. Permanent restraining order against Gregorio Blair. As they left the courthouse, Emma turned to Alan. Is it really over? The legal part is, Alan said. But there's still Gregorio's criminal trial. That's where the real justice happens. Emma smiled, a sharp, fierce smile that reminded Alan of himself. Good. I want to testify. Are you sure? It won't be easy. I'm sure. He needs to face what he did. And I need to tell the truth in public where everyone can hear it. Alan hugged his daughter. You're the bravest person I know. I learned from you, Dad. Chapter 8, The Reckoning. Gregorio Blair's trial began 6 weeks later, in late January. The prosecution had built a fortress of evidence. Medical records, pharmaceutical records, financial documents, recordings, testimony from Dr. Ruiz, testimony from Danielle, and testimony from Emma herself. Alan sat in the courtroom gallery every day, watching as the man who'd stolen 3 years of his daughter's life tried desperately to escape justice. Gregorio's new lawyer, his third after the first 2 quit, tried various defenses. Gregorio was just trying to help. Danielle had exaggerated Emma's symptoms. Dr. Ruiz had acted independently. The medications were appropriate. Emma was misremembering due to teenage drama. Each defense crumbled under the weight of evidence. Dr. Marcus Mathis testified about the medical abuse, explaining in detail how the medications had affected Emma's development, her memory, her personality. This child was systematically sedated for years. The damage could have been permanent. She's extraordinarily lucky. Dr. Ruiz testified about Gregorio's cash payments, about how Gregorio had specified exact medications and doses without Emma ever being properly examined. He knew what he wanted. He had medical knowledge from his pharmaceutical background. This wasn't a concerned guardian seeking help. This was calculated drugging. Financial experts testified about Gregorio's deteriorating finances, his dependence on Danielle's income, his clear motive to access Emma's trust fund. Then came Danielle. She looked smaller on the witness stand, diminished. Her expensive clothes couldn't hide the weight she'd lost, the sleepless nights evident in her face. I trusted him, she said, her voice barely audible. Gregorio was charming, supportive when Alan and I divorced. He said he'd worked in pharmaceuticals, that he understood medical issues. When Emma seemed quiet after the divorce, which was normal, she was processing, he suggested maybe she needed some support. Just some light medication to help with anxiety. Did you question the medications? The prosecutor asked. At first, yes. But Gregorio said Dr. Ruiz was a specialist. He handled all the appointments, all the prescriptions. He said it was better if I didn't overwhelm Emma by hovering. She broke down. I believed him because it was easier than admitting I'd brought a monster into my daughter's life. Did you know about the trust fund plan? No, not until Alan showed me those recordings. I thought Gregorio loved Emma like his own daughter. I thought he was helping. I was so wrong. Danielle looked at Emma in the gallery. Baby, I'm so sorry. I failed you. I chose to believe lies because the truth was too ugly. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know that I see now what I did, and I'm sorry. Emma's face remained impassive. Finally, it was Emma's turn to testify. The judge had cleared most of the gallery for her testimony, leaving only necessary parties. But Emma had requested that her father be allowed to stay. She walked to the witness stand with her head high, wearing a simple blue dress Robin had helped her pick out. She looked older than 14, or perhaps she'd been forced to grow up too fast. The prosecutor handled her gently. Emma, can you describe your daily routine when you lived with your mother and Mr. Blair? Emma's voice was clear and steady. Every morning, Gregorio would give me pills. He called them vitamins, but they were prescription medications. Within an hour, I'd feel foggy. Everything would seem far away. I'd go to school, but I couldn't concentrate. I'd come home, and Gregorio would give me more pills. Then I'd do homework, or try to, but mostly I'd just sit there confused. Then more pills before bed. That was every day for almost 3 years. Did you ever question this routine? Sometimes I'd think something was wrong. I'd have these moments where I'd remember being different, being happier. But then Gregorio would tell me I was sick, that the medication was helping me, that without it I'd be much worse. And I believed him because I was too drugged to think clearly. Did Mr. Blair ever discuss your trust fund with you? All the time. When I was really foggy, he'd ask me questions about it, about whether I'd need help managing it, whether I trusted him and my mom to make decisions. He recorded these conversations on his phone. I'd answer whatever he wanted because I couldn't think straight. Do you believe Mr. Blair cared about your well-being? Emma looked directly at Gregorio for the first time. No, he cared about money. I was just a bank account he needed to keep quiet and compliant until he could access it. I wasn't a person to him. I was a resource. Gregorio's lawyer tried to shake her on cross-examination, suggesting she was confused, that her memories might be influenced by her father's campaign against Gregorio. My father didn't need a campaign, Emma said firmly. The truth is the campaign. You drugged me. You stole 3 years of my life. You were going to steal my inheritance. And you would have destroyed me completely if my dad hadn't figured it out. The lawyer tried another angle. Isn't it true you were rebellious after the divorce? That you were acting out? I was 11 years old dealing with my parents splitting up, Emma said. I was sad sometimes. I miss my dad. That's not a mental illness. That's being a normal kid. But you and my mother turned it into a reason to drug me into a zombie. After Emma's testimony, the trial's outcome was never in doubt. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. Medical abuse of a minor, financial exploitation, obtaining prescriptions under false pretenses, child endangerment, witness tampering. At sentencing 2 weeks later, the judge was unsparing. Mr. Blair, you systematically abused a child for financial gain. You used your pharmaceutical knowledge not to help, but to harm. You stole 3 years of this young woman's childhood and nearly destroyed her future. This court finds your actions reprehensible and deserving of the maximum sentence allowed by law. 15 years in prison. No possibility of parole for 8 years. Lifetime restraining order from Emma. Complete financial restitution, though Gregorio had no assets left to seize. As bailiffs led Gregorio away, he looked back at Alan one final time. No words exchanged, but Alan saw the defeat in the man's eyes. The con artist who'd thought he could drug a child and steal her future, now facing his own future in a cell. Justice, Alan thought, wasn't always swift, but when it came, it was thorough. Chapter 9. Thanksgiving again. 11 months later, November arrived with crisp Arizona air and the promise of a very different Thanksgiving. Alan stood in his kitchen, their kitchen now, his and Robin's and Emma's, watching his daughter help Robin prep the turkey. Emma was 15 now, about to turn 16 in 2 months. The trust fund would become accessible then, but they'd already decided. It would stay invested, managed professionally, accessible but not tempting. Emma had more important things to focus on. "Dad, you're hovering," Emma said, not looking up from the potatoes she was mashing. "I'm supervising," Alan corrected. "You're being sappy." Emma grinned at him, a real grin, full of life and mischief. The doorbell rang. Diane Carpenter arrived with her arms full of dishes, followed by Coy Little and his wife, then Dr. Mathis and his partner, then Randall McCoy with his husband. Alan had invited everyone who'd helped save Emma. His family had expanded beyond blood, and he was grateful for each person who'd stood with them. During dinner, surrounded by people who genuinely cared, Alan watched Emma laugh at one of Coy's terrible jokes. She'd fully recovered, physically, mentally, emotionally. She was in therapy, processing the trauma, but she was healing. She'd rejoined the art club at school and had even won a regional competition for her architectural drawings. "She gets that from you," Robin had said when they'd hung Emma's award in the living room. Maybe she did, but Emma had something Alan had to learn: resilience. She'd been through hell and emerged stronger, not broken. She'd faced her abusers in court. She'd reclaimed her life. After dinner, while others chatted over pie, Emma pulled Alan aside. "I heard from Mom," she said quietly. Alan tensed. Danielle had served 9 months in county jail, followed by probation. She'd been released 2 months ago. The restraining order prevented direct contact, but Emma could initiate it if she chose. "What did she say?" "She wrote me a letter. Apologized again. Said she's in therapy, working on herself. Asked if maybe someday, years from now, we could talk. No pressure, no expectations. Just possibility. How do you feel about that?" Emma was quiet for a moment. "I don't know. Part of me is still angry. Part of me misses the mom she was before Gregorio. Part of me thinks maybe someday I'll be ready to see if there's anything left to salvage there. But not now. Not for a long time." "That's fair," Alan said. "Take all the time you need. There's no timeline for healing." "Did you heal?" Emma asked. "From the divorce, from losing me for 3 years?" "I'm still healing," Alan admitted. "But having you back, seeing you happy and healthy, that's made everything worthwhile. You were worth fighting for, Emma. You're always worth fighting for." Emma hugged him. "I know, Dad. Thank you for not giving up on me." As they returned to the others, Alan felt something settle in his chest. Not quite peace, but close. Justice had been served. His daughter was safe. His family was whole. Robin caught his eye from across the room and smiled. She'd seen something wrong that night last year, and she'd spoken up. She'd saved Emma's life. Later, after everyone had left and Emma had gone to bed, Alan and Robin stood in their backyard, looking at the Arizona stars. "Gregorio's appeal was denied yesterday," Robin mentioned. "Coy told me. He'll serve the full 15 years. "Good," Alan said simply. There was no vindictiveness in his voice, just finality. "Are you happy with how everything turned out?" Alan considered the question. Happy isn't the right word. Emma lost 3 years she'll never get back. Danielle destroyed her own relationship with her daughter. A man is in prison. But justice was done, Emma is healing, and we're a family. So no, not happy. But satisfied. Complete. And if you could do it all over again, change anything, I'd have figured it out sooner, Alan said immediately. I'd have questioned why Emma stopped calling. I'd have pushed harder for visits. I'd have. Robin put a finger on his lips. You did what you could with what you knew. And when you had the chance, you protected her perfectly. You were strategic, thorough, and you made sure those people could never hurt her again. Emma has her father back. That's what matters. Alan pulled Robin close. We make a good team. We do, she agreed. Engineer and pharmacist. Building futures and healing wounds. Inside, Alan heard Emma laugh at something on her phone, probably texting her friends, making plans, living the normal teenage life that had been stolen from her. He'd been asked to engineer many things in his career. Bridges, buildings, structures meant to withstand earthquakes and time. But the most important thing he'd ever built was this, a safe space for his daughter to heal. A family that protected each other. A future not defined by trauma, but by recovery. Next week, Emma would start her architectural drafting class at school. She wanted to be an engineer like her dad, Sheets said. Design buildings that would protect people. Alan smiled. His daughter had learned that protection wasn't just about strong structures. It was about recognizing danger, having the courage to face it, and the strength to fight back. She'd learned that from him. But she taught